Welcome to Redtastic. Story 1. My mother, R, became a widow of 2 kids, me age 7 and my brother age 5, 11 years ago after my father died. I don't know how we stayed afloat financially at this time since I was so young, but he was an electrical engineer, so I suppose we had some of his income saved in some life insurance benefits. My family, while not rich, never really worried about money. This all changed about the time I entered high school. Suddenly, my mother would yell at me whenever I asked for gas money or some extra cash to go out with friends. I may have been a bit of a spender, like most kids my age are, but money had never been a problem before, and I didn't cope with the change well at first. Eventually, I cut back on my spending and started trying to find ways my family could save money. This worked for a bit and things were fine. I went out a little less and sometimes I had to drive the car on empty or ask for rides, but everything seemed fine. Then my brother, 17 male, dropped out of high school. He was 15 at the time, too young to stop going legally, but he refused to go nonetheless. Things got very dark very quick. We got letters from the courts, from the school, even some from child services. My mother was very lost and stressed constantly. My spending at this time dropped to almost nothing. I felt terribly guilty even asking my mother for lunch money. Her eventual solution was to send my brother to a military school over the summer. The semester alone cost around $20,000. I never asked where the money came from. I figured maybe things were desperate enough that she had pulled from her retirement or borrowed from my grandparents. He came back from school, things got a little better, and then he decided that he wanted to go to Peru as an exchange student for a year. He and my mother talked it over for months, and she finally agreed. She wouldn't tell me how much it cost, but I can guess it wasn't cheap. He ended up coming home early after just a few months, and we were not reimbursed for the costs. After all this, I expected things to go to hell. All this money gone, my brother still refusing to go to school, and child services threatening to step in. Then my mother picks me up from school and gives me the keys to the car and says, "Why don't you drive? It's your car now," with this huge smile. I'm hella confused about the situation until I get home and see a brand new, custom-painted Mini Cooper sitting in the driveway. My mother just bought herself a new car. What the frick? A couple months of snooping later, I intercepted a letter from the IRS containing information about 2 529 saving plans in my name and my brother's name. I didn't even know these existed. I opened them up and looked at my brother's first. He's got about $70,000 in that account, with a $5,000 subtraction listed for last year. Things started to fall into place. She has been pulling from our secret college accounts to pay for all these purchases. This should have been a warning, but I was too excited to care. I was looking forward to seeing the $70,000 listed under my name as well. I flip to mine and see $10,000 listed total, with a $37,000 subtraction listed from last year. What? I don't even know what to think right now. But it looks to me like my mother has been using my college fund to pay for my brother's schooling as well as a brand new custom car. It looks like she intended to keep the account a secret in hopes that I wouldn't ever be the wiser. This pisses me off because I understand that being a single mother of 2 is hard. But my mother has not held one single job since my father died. I have held 2 jobs simultaneously just this last year, with half my income going to her because I felt so bad about our finances. My brother, who is now 17, has dropped out of school and sits in his room literally all day playing LOL and screaming. I'm the only one trying in this family, and it has become very apparent that I'm being walked all over. I never thought my mother had it in her. What am I supposed to do? How do I even mention this to her? Update. While I appreciate those advising me to seek legal counsel, I'm really not interested in suing my mother, attempting to seize the account or possibly get her audited by the IRS. I'm looking for advice. on how to recover from an event that has made me reconsider the person I thought my mother was and the life I thought I had been living for the past 11 years. The past couple of days have been hectic. I've been working double shifts because one of my co-workers is sick and I'm covering for him. This means I leave the house early in the morning, 5 or 6 a.m., and usually don't get home until midnight or 1 a.m. the next day. Once I had some time at home, I had intended to sit down and ask my mother about everything. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she would probably be able to talk me down or convince me of something untrue. She's my mom, and even when I'm super pissed at her, my subconsciousness tries to make excuses. So instead, I asked my manager for a 2-hour lunch break so I could go visit my grandparents across town and have a talk with them before confronting my mother. They pretty much confirmed everything I had already come up with. There were some parts I had a little wrong, like it turns out that my father was not the sole contributor to the accounts. My grandparents had actually put in 25% of the original amount. They also told me that they had already tried seizing the accounts from my mother immediately after my father's death, but that her legal advisor was able to use my father's poorly detailed will to spin it in her favor. My father clearly hadn't expected to pass when he did, and so his will was very generic and left out a lot of things. The judicial system sided with my mother on most issues, even when my grandparents tried to get involved. They knew she would not spend the money the way that he had planned because she had never understood the real value of money before. They told me how infuriating it was to watch her raise their grandchildren and basically break down everything my father had built for our family. They encouraged me to move out as soon as possible and start saving all my money for college. They told me that whatever I had saved at the end of this year, they would match as long as I still intended to use it for school, and that I was no longer supporting my mother. This is a great relief, an opportunity, and I'm grateful for them. But I still feel really shitty about the whole thing. I spent last night at my friend's house, and when I went back home the next morning, my mother demanded to know where I had been. I told her I had lunch with my grandparents, and they had mentioned some college accounts. At this, she basically lost what was left of her sanity. She was really mad at first. Then she started crying and yelling horrible things at me like how I'm the worst daughter, I'm breaking up the family, and my personal favorite, how it's all my fault Dad died. At that point, I kind of lost it and packed up my important stuff and left. I'm at my friend's house right now, and she's offered to let me stay with her as long as I need to as a roommate. I just have to help with groceries and other expenses. But with 2 jobs, that shouldn't be a problem. I filled out my FAFSA and applied to a couple of the local colleges and 2 big state universities. Hopefully, I'll be able to attend school soon and put this whole nightmare behind. I'm torn up with guilt for leaving my brother behind, and I still hear my mother's words in my head. But I also know this was probably my best option. Thanks for all your help and support. A lot of money was saved for OP that has essentially been squandered. OP has a mother who is financially terrible and apparently never learned to manage money properly. And now that OP's dad's savings are gone, the chickens are coming home to roost on that. But honestly, these were problems with or without the 529 account, and OP needs to address them as such. But don't think of it as theft. And we know who Mom's favorite is, right? The way she left his account more intact than OP's when the money was funneled to fund his education says it all. Now for some comments. Just ask her, calmly, you're both adults. If you don't get some answers, it will continue to eat at your relationship. What I don't get is why she would gut your account but not his, particularly since it's fairly obvious he wasn't going to get a higher education. Odd indeed. Good luck to you. Really? Sounds to me like her mom knew what she was doing and OP has given her enough chances. And what an awful thing to say. What if she commits suicide? That's not OP's responsibility. That would be entirely the mom's choice. No matter how all of this family pain and financial bullshit works itself out, I do sincerely hope that if you want to go to college, you will go. It won't necessarily be easy or straightforward, but people coming from limited means make it every day. You have a clear head, a strong work ethic, and you communicate well. You can go wherever you want in life. Story 2. So my nephew just turned 18, and his parents, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, my husband's brother and his wife, just dropped on him that he now has to pay rent. He's living at home and going to school nearby, and works part-time to help pay for school expenses, car expenses, etc. They're basically asking for market price, or near that, for rent from him. He can't possibly make enough to pay this and stay in school at the same time. My husband and I feel they're not being reasonable at all, but they say it's to teach him responsibility and how to deal with money. He is a responsible kid and has been working since he was 16. I don't think charging him full pop to live at home is fair. We live nearby, so we are very close with their kids. We see them all the time. We've always babysat whenever they need. We don't have kids of our own and are homebodies, so we're nearly always available and happy to do it. We love those kids. So when nephew told us about this sudden arrangement, we offered to let him move in with us, rent-free, but we would help him learn to budget and save money, which honestly, he's already pretty good at for his age. He saved up and bought his own car already. Nephew accepted and we got an angry phone call once he told his parents. This has caused a whole tiff in the family, everyone telling us to butt out, stop interfering with their parenting. They know best. We're not even parents, so what do we know? We are keeping him from learning responsibility by not forcing him to pay rent, etc. We offered this arrangement in the first place because my nephew was so upset. We were worried he would have a panic attack or something. He thought he was going to be forced to drop out of school, which is obviously already taken out a loan for, as it's halfway through the semester, freaking out that he wouldn't be able to pay it back and pay rent as well. We do not live in a low cost of living area. I don't know anyone his age who could possibly afford rent in our city. I know couples in their late 20s or 30s in this city who struggle on 2 incomes. But my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were planning to charge him that amount now that they can, because he turned 18. My husband and I are not willing to back down, but sister-in-law and brother-in-law are raising hell in the family over this drama, and it's become a whole thing, and we are hearing it from every side. Even people who agree with us, but are telling us to back down to keep the peace. Should we have just stayed out of it? Are we out of line for parenting someone else's kids, as my in-laws put it? Not the a-hole. OP, stand your ground. It's insane that OP's brother-in-law and sister-in-law would be so greedy as to basically cripple their own child's future for rent money. OP is planning on teaching him budgeting, which will set him up better anyway than what they're proposing, because there is no way to budget effectively when you're constantly scrambling to pay whatever bill you can afford to keep your head above water. Now for some comments. Not the a-hole. His parents are assholes, and the family member taking their side are jerks. Has no one stopped to ask them what they plan to do with this rent money? Because I would be disgusted with my sibling basically making money off their 18-year-old. Maybe if the family needed the money, it might possibly make sense. But to just take money from your kid, that's greedy. I think it's possible to be incredibly clueless on what a part-time job pays these days and how that stacks up against bills like rent, etc. Previous generations had a much easier time with this, so that wouldn't be unheard of. But the fact that the kid has tried to explain and was extremely upset and they didn't budge means they're probably assholes or in financial trouble. And the fact that they pitched a fit at the missed income screams financial issues. Not the a-hole. When people mention that you are interfering with their parenting, you can reply, he's 18. He's not a child anymore and doesn't need parenting, or else they wouldn't be charging him rent. If the parents want to charge market rate to let an adult stay in their place, they can still do so. Probably they just wanted extra income flow, which is disgusting.